Guten Morgen. I am making this video this morning with a new dress code so that I can portray myself as a legitimate force in world history. And it's the day after I made the videos on Maswich and the SOE and all of the intel profiteering that takes you again and again into Governor Generals on other continents. And this movie, this little movie I'm going to make now, is about a movie made in 1981 about Gallipoli. It's really not funny. I've got my baldric on to make me look like an authentic revolutionary historian. And I've got my little tartan bow tie on to make me look like Lord Renfrew of Thorn, who are portrayed as the profiteer in the Time Team sector out of Jesus College, Cambridge, in yesterday's videos. I want to show you how vicious the team that owns the world is. This is a movie about Gallipoli, and I'm going to show you a few seconds of the Gallipoli movie. And there is the declaration that this is about Gallipoli. Scotland's greatest hero, Mel Gibson, is in it. He does not have the kilt on this time, but he's still taking the piss. There's a Kerr in the star team, but that is totally irrelevant. So this is the 1981 Gallipoli, and it's a Paramount success. And it's made in America, I believe, which is the Paramount joke, and Go West Young Man and the YMCA and all of that stuff we've laughed at for ages now. But I'm going to show you how this interlocks with the twisted media, the Dukes of Cambridge, the German monarchs, and with the Crimean conflict, which is a huge cover-up for the genocides in World War II. Right then, you need to watch carefully, because the shocking revelations about the makers of this film, about the battle for world ownership and the slaughter of Australasian troops, you need to see who leads the campaign. Now an American citizen, thanks to the CIA for whom he worked, the Newgone Hand Bank, Gough Whitlam, the Prime Minister of Australia, and the American President at the time, who I think was Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford and Mel Gibson are the most innocent people in the story to date. Right then, so play Paramount, a Gulf Western company. This is Gallipoli, made in 1981. Robert Stigwood, Rupert Murdoch, for Associated R&R Films, PTI Limited, present. Peter Weir's film of Gallipoli. We've seen enough. We do not want to risk another copyright infringement. The story with Mel Gibson. I'll stop it. And usually when you stop things on the Putlocker channel, you get all sorts of vicious jokes about naked women and the Betfair concept and all of the things that they see as really funny about the GG sector. That's the Governor General joke, but it is also the horse racing joke, and all across the world. From the Melbourne Cup to the Grand National, it's now a pay-per-view exercise in Rupert Murdoch's hands, and he thinks it's really funny to laugh at the war dead. And Mel Gibson's been on rehab, but I'm getting off the issues. There's the British equivalent of the heroic person who works for the people. That's Tony Robinson, who was mentioned in the Blackadder scandals in yesterday's video. Right then, let's get back to what we were talking about when we talked about objectively about the Prince, the Duke of Cambridge, who's on board the Caradoc in the Crimean War, and there is the Caradoc that was made in, I think that's CLA, that could be Clydeside, but I don't know what the code is in the shipping industry. It was built in 1918. Yeah, the original Caradoc that we talked about yesterday in the Gallipoli catastrophe story. Yeah, that Caradoc had on board it the Duke of Cambridge, and that is actually the Crimean conflict. So the Caradoc that is pictured on Google Images all over it is a modern warship that was built in 1918 after the Gallipoli campaign was over. Okay, you cannot believe anything that you learn about it, but in the books on the death of Lord Raglan, the Duke of Cambridge is portrayed as being sitting and dining and entertaining his guests on the Caradoc offshore from Gallipoli. Yeah, and there's the joke about the dragon being part of this story, and the crown with the sails on it is the legend about Britain's legendary might and its naval forces. And there is the whole thing summarised, the ship in a bottle concept. That's a trading brig with the Union Jack on the back and the red ensign on the top. There is no sign of the skull and bones symbol that this is part of the secret society's perpetual warmongering story. But let's scan down and see what we get. Okay, I'm going to take my kit off like the pole dancers do, and it's just because it's a scintillating day. In the space of 2 or 3 days since I started to make the revelations about the genocides, the sun has come pouring out, and I cannot keep pace with the growth and the flourishing and the budding of all of those trees. The Rothschild yellow daffodils are now wilting. Right then, so for those of you who can relate to the pole dancing concept and the role of women like Carenza in life, yeah, here we go. It may be really dangerous for me to get the tartan off. Right then, back into civvies, and let's get the revelations made before my batteries run out, because I've only got 30 minutes or so. Okay, so this is the Duke of Cambridge and the story about Lord Raglan in the Google book story, where I get all of the facts about Colonel Doyle and HRH the Duke being offshore and Lord George Brown and all of them. So the way they twist history now is to keep replaying the ships, and it's tragic what happened to the CICs in the Falklands when the ship was sunk, because they committed the captain of the ship that the Argentinians sank. They rendered him as a national traitor, and he lost all of his reputation. Yeah. That's because they expect only the deaths to occur on one side when Mrs. Thatcher's in power. Okay, I forget what the name of the ship and the man that was persecuted for that was, but we were listening to the documentary of that as we passed through Hertfordshire and the massive Rothschild owned mansions. Yeah, everything they do, they laugh at it, and there is possibly something that the Caradoc would have been in the Crimean campaign, a steamship but made of wood with the sails just in case something goes wrong in the boiler room. Yeah, do you get it? Every war is about the boiler room and the money laundering prospects that ensue. Mailed. Okay, so when I found out that the Duke of Cambridge was involved, I thought it was really important to find out who, during the Crimean period, the Duke of Cambridge actually was. And if you look the Cambridge Duke up on Wikipedia, you'll see that there are several candidates in British history, and the current Duke of Cambridge is Prince William, who's married to Kate. Okay, so that's a very reputationally stable title to have for the next monarch after Prince Charlie. Although I don't understand the laws of succession and how they were changed in 2012, but that is, I do understand the panic attack that was created by Greg Hallett's revelations of the illegitimacy of all of the people in the royal court and in the commanding positions to be in charge of the navy, because Winston Churchill's back in power by World War II, and he fudged the World War I Gallipoli campaign, and Rupert Murdoch's allowed to make the movies about all of that and the genocide of all of those innocent Anzacs, and Mr. Bean being the war correspondent is a really shameful revelation, but they laugh at it at the London Olympics. Okay, older generations of navy ships include wooden steamers. Okay, right then, let's see what we've got on the Cambridges and their involvement in the monarchy. So that's local militias. So the local militias and the death toll. So the Cambridgeshire Regiment, 1908 to 1961. Country, United Kingdom. British Army, Territorial Army, Infantry, Cambridge Blue and Black, Battle of the Somme, Fall of Singapore. Yeah, so these are the people that are interned in the Japanese prison camps in World War II. And the Japanese leader is a friend of the British leader, and that never changes, as John Patterson has acknowledged in recent videos. Okay, they're tied to the East Lancashire Regiment in 1881 and the 30th Cambridgeshire Regiment of Foot Soldiers. Okay, the slaughter goes on for centuries. The Cambridgeshire Regiment was a territorial infantry regiment of the British Army Rifle Volunteers formed in 1860. The regiment served in the Second Anglo-Boer War, that's thousands of miles from home in the Republic of South Africa, for the gold and diamond rights that eventually Tiny Rowlands and Lonhro achieve. First and Second World Wars before losing its separate identity in 1961. Its lineage is continued today by the Royal Anglican Regiment. The Royal Volunteer Corps formed in Cambridgeshire. Okay, so you've got a rundown of the historical transcript, and I don't have the time to give you the details. Okay, in 1947, oh no, oh yeah, and when you see the conflicts they've been involved in. Right then, pre-1908 Rifle Volunteers, Suffolk Regiment, Second Boer War, 1908 to 1919, Territorial Force in 1908, became the 3rd, the Cambridgeshire Battalion. The Suffolk Regiment in the following year were constituted a separate regiment with the title 1st Battalion, the Cambridgeshire Regiment. First World War, the Territorial Force was doubled in size, with the Cambridge Regiment forming a 2 1st Battalion. In 1915, a further increase in the size in the TF led to the formation of 3 1st, 4 1st Battalions. The regiment's 1 1st Battalion fought on the Western Front, and 27 battle honours were awarded in 1925. Yeah, so we get the sensational statistics and the medal winners, and all of it ties into that meeting of the genocidal leaders in the Hotel Cecil in 1912. Yeah, the regiment 1st Battalion fought on the Western Front, and 27 battle honours were awarded in 1925. Those in bold type were selected as representative honours, so we get only the prize winners. Yet we do not get any statistics on how many of them were left on the continent in shallow graves that are now the tourist industry. But you can see where they've been in the name of the royal prince. Yeah, Ypres 15 to 17, Gravenstaffel, St Julian, Fresenberg, the Somme 1916 to 18, Anchor Heights, Anchor 1916, Pilkham, Menham Road, Polygon Wood, Broodsindy, Paul Capel, Passchendaele, San Quentin, and that launches the songs about the prisons in America and the cover-ups for all of these genocides. The fleur-de-lis joke, yeah, part of the legendary pole dancer's role and the legendary stories about French Romanticism. Kemmel, Scherpenberg, Amiens, Albert 1918, Bapaume, that's a joke about Albert the Poufda in the palace, Hindenburg Line, Épinay, San Quentin Canal, Pursuit to Mons, and we still have Mons Meg on the Edinburgh Castle summit, where it's looking down on the corrupted city, and where the speculative society is much closer in the Edinburgh University buildings on slightly lower ground, but not much. France and Flanders 1915 to 18. The last known of the Kemmel was Warwick's. Oh, so these are the surviving people and the romantic people and the people that have died in our lifetime. Yet, so the last of the regiment died in March 2000, and his name was Private George Edward White. White is the colour of the strips and the jokes about the dead in the Bible. And it is really sick. Territorial force was disbanded in 1920. Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, that's the Percy in some of the stories, but the real Percys, the power brokers, are the Dukes of Northumberland, who take you back to claimants to the British throne, who get their heads lopped off, and Harry Hotspur, the Tottenham Hotspur joke, and they're present as Perseus right back in the Roman court. Okay, this is the infantry people that got garrisoned and imprisoned in the Japanese internment camps. Okay, and the Japanese are so loyal to the corrupted emperor that they will commit suicide every time they lose a battle or are compromised or are even taken prisoner. That's the falling on your sword concept that they're gonna do in the palace very soon, because they had the gall to make the Mr. Bean joke at the London Olympics. Okay, they're involved in Malaya 1942. I first became involved in research on foodstuffs that were used because the people in the South Pacific were being starved, and the people that got dementias in that sector was amazing. And that is also the focus of some of my colleagues in the Canadian institutions that are now totally underfunded. And even when I met those people in New Zealand, they still got a block vote from the government in Canada. That's all gone now. There is no decent funding for any decent research activity left. It's all about covering up all of these massive sins. Yep, okay, so let's keep going. Royal Anglian Regiment Museum. Watch the previous video I made on the little postcards that you get that are a joke about your capacity beyond your death to tick the boxes on your letters back home. It is really ruthless, and that is issued and posted officially on the wall of the Royal the Durham Light Infantry Museum. This is an ad for the Royal Anglian Regiment Museum, based at the Land Warfare Hall of the Imperial War Museum, Duxford. Okay, let's go down, because we're so missing in action. I think will be a reference to who the Dukes of Cambridge were at the times of these various stories. Okay, so this is the Wikipedia entry on the Dukes of Cambridge, and there's what it spans. There's the current Duke with Kate, who is also one of the most decent people in this story, because she's a commoner like the Queen Mum, who sired Bill Clinton, who was shagged by Winston Churchill. No, she was inseminated with Winston Churchill's semen, and that was then led to the birth of Queen Elizabeth II and Bill Clinton. The Queen Mother was a maid, and she loved the GG concept, and she loved a gin, because she was a simple person from the household downstairs. The other person who was picked to be the Queen of the Stammering King buggered off to Denmark for reputational reasons, and because she did not want to live with an imbecile for the rest of her days. Okay, right then, let's go to the top and just let you see that this is the Duke of Cambridge, and all of it is above board. The fat bastard at the bottom is the one that had blind King George's son executed because he was in the way as the legitimate monarch. Okay, and that is Queen Victoria's only legitimate child, and she conceived that person when she was only 14 on the Isle of Wight, which is all over the previous video I made on the profiteering and all of the registered numbers for the Time Team and their interlocks to the militias and to the Church of England and to all of the religious figureheads. So that's the militias, the Navy, the Army and the Air Force in Britain, all interlocked with the historians from Cambridge, led by the Renfrew man, okay, and the Pratt and Sons joke and the Baldrick jokes. All of them are part of that story in yesterday's video. So let's keep going before the batteries. And it's really confusing, because you've got someone who's portrayed in British history. So here's the Stuart Dynasty, 1663, living in Richmond Palace already by 1667, okay, and that's the baby that was the king, and this is the launch of the Church of England and the Church of Scotland's Bible, and St James is already the name for the palace. Yeah, there was no St James. It's really, really funny. And the Jekyll and Hyde joke is about the black men in the emancipation of the slave story and the remuneration of the slave owners for their loss of income. Jekyll and Hyde. Look it up on my website. Edgar Stuart. So we're still in 1671. Let's get into the really bloody conflicts when we had invented the tank already. Dukes of York, Hyde's Princess Mary of Modena, House of Stuart still, 1677, Prince George Augustus, House of Hanover, we're up to 1683, Herrenhausen Palace, Hanover, son of George Louis, Prince Elector, Duke of Brunswick, Lüneburg, Sophia Dorothea and Sophia Dorothea of Celle. Marriage, Caroline of Ansbach. Death, Kensington Palace, London, 1760. Yeah, we're deeply intertwined, which is why the Windsors quickly adopted the name Windsor when the common people began to suss them out. Prince George succeeded George II in 1727 upon his father's death, and the man that is portrayed in Hollywood culture as George III, with the pisspot doctors and all of the diagnoses of his stools, yeah, it's a cover for blind King George, and he's blinded, and all of the bastards in these bloodlines get the blue blood syndrome, which is syphilis. And it's shared with the Blixen joke for the Weapons Inspectorate in the Out of Africa film, and the Blixen who was in charge of the Nuclear Weapons Inspectorate, who declared South Africa to be nuclear free, which is a total lie. Yeah, but that takes us into David Cameron's lifetime, and I don't want to go there just yet. Okay, right then. So now we're getting up to a period around where the Crimean conflict became very relevant, and we're almost into World War I, and this is where the bedroom behaviours become really important. This is 1801 to 1850. We had a Prince Adolf us in the House of Hanover, yeah, also the Earl of Tipperary in Ireland, which is why I've portrayed that in green, and the Baron Culloden, 1801 to 1818. Yeah, he died really young. Yeah, and that is really prevalent in the monarchy bloodlines when they have rivals to the throne. Okay, birth, Buckingham Palace, Westminster. His name is the Prince Adolphus, House of Hanover. Have you heard of him before? And have you got relatives in Ireland? And have you got people that have visited Culloden? Odin is one of the Norse gods. Okay, Princess Augusta, this is the marriage of Hesse-Cassel, that's the Hesses, with the links to the Hamiltons, and who were Hitler's friends and tried to stop the war in the mid-war. Yeah, and that's only one of the body doubles. Died in Cambridge House, Piccadilly, London, in his bed. He's got the baldric, and he's got the Knights of Malta thing that everybody that is in the upper echelons of the world ownership team have. Okay, the next one, his son, is Prince George, House of Hanover, 1850 to 1904, around about the time when Queen Victoria would be thinking about having a good time in the bedroom with her one true love. Earl of Tipperary, Baron Culloden, 1815 to 1904. Marcus Manuel, okay, is the son. Marcus Manuel died young, murdered by the really fat bloke from the Saxe-Coburg rivals. Okay, so we've now got the blind Prince George, and the cover-ups involving the mad George III much earlier are in Hollywood fiction already. And I know the man that played the doctor who diagnosed the stools issue, because he comes to Ednam House and fishes for salmon on the Scottish River every year. And when I saw him in Hertfordshire at the Berkhamsted station where I used to commute from, there was a stunning incident when he got onto the train and sat down opposite me, because a man who was slightly disabled got his hot head stuck in the automatic doors and was moved 10 metres or so along the platform. Everything I get in the whole of my lifespan is a message from the gods about where the villains are and where the heroes are, and they're tiny in number now. Okay, so Prince George, House of Hanover, 1850 to 1904. You cannot believe any of the published facts, but I can now see the light beginning to shine through the cracks. Okay, 26th March 1819, born, Cambridge House, Hanover. Yeah, even in Germany the Cambridge-Oxbridge link is thriving, and that's why Cambridge and Oxford and Göttingen and Heidelberg, which produces almost all the prime ministers and chancellors in their respective countries, are chosen to be no bombing zones, and they provide the rocket scientists and the nuclear physicists that do for Japan in the end. Son of Prince Adolf, us, Duke of Cambridge, and Princess Augusta of Hesse-Cassel. See selection of Prince George for this title. Yeah, so the new baby for the current Duke of Cambridge is George. Yeah, yeah, and it was born in the place where I used to work, where I met the Duke of Roxburgh when he was having his first baby by his second nurse. It's called the Lindo wing. I do not understand yet the Lindo joke, but by sundown this evening I will be able to relate to you. That's where the woman in the nursing sector committed suicide because she got a scam call from the Australian people that work for Rupert Murdoch, and all of that is the cover for the false news of the total illegitimacy of the monarchy and the changing of the laws of succession in 2012, which was convened in a meeting at Cobham, and all over my lifetime I got my grandpa's picture of Cobham Common, but because we were forced into poverty when we left New Zealand, I left it behind with all of the other chattels that we could not afford to transfer over here. Yeah, she married, this is Prince George, so married Sarah Fairbrother. This is the Prince George that sired Queen Victoria's only legitimate child, and they were married. The second marriage to Prince Albert was a bigamous marriage, and all of the children were sired by Nathan Mayer Rothschild and one of his relatives, inbred relatives, yeah, and he launches the goldfish joke, because the goldfish is Nathan Mayer Rothschild's penis, and that takes you back into biblical times and the loaves and fishes jokes. It is really, really sick. He died, Prince George, 17th March 1904, Gloucester House, Piccadilly, London, an easy target directly adjacent to the Saxe-Coburgs, who by then become the legitimate monarchs in inverted commas. Okay, and what we've got here is Greg Hallett's declarations on air when Jim Fetzer is saying, shit, I've never heard such an insightful interview in the whole of my period as an investigative journalist, but Greg Hallett tells the story extremely well. Blind Prince George of Cumberland, who became Blind King George V of Hanover, he was married to Queen Victoria on the 18th of September 1833, and Marcus Manuel was born on the 25th of April 1834. He's the one partying on board the Caradoc in the Crimean conflict that I thought mistakenly had been left in as part of World War I and the Gallipoli massacres, but no, that is an earlier Gallipoli massacre, and he's on board the Caradoc. There are no images of his original Caradoc now, which is why I showed you the one at the top of the page. Yeah, missing in action. Okay, so there are two massacres at Gallipoli, but not many people know that until today. He is fighting for the Brits and the Free French, by the way, against the Germans. All of them born and raised and died in their beds in London. Gallipoli is a scandal on both occasions, but in the Crimean it is almost forgotten, like HRH Queen Vic's first baby and the only one in legitimate wedlock. Okay, there's the current incumbent, born at St Mary's Hospital, Lindo Wing in London. Yeah. And his brother and him have been trained in the militaries, and they tell you, despite being pictured by Berlusconi's press naked in the orgies that they attend, which is part of their commitment to their role in life, none of them do anything for their country except demonise other people, and those are the innocents. So that's Prince William, House of Windsor. That was not the real name, by the way. But it launches the Windsors into the Queen Vic in Coronation Street, and it launches her husband into the Badger Cull diversionary sector. 2011, yeah, a year before they changed the laws of succession, with all of the heads of Commonwealth in inverted commas. That's the puppet regimes like the Kenyan regime, who've forgotten about the Mau Mau massacres by now, and all of them get to live in a life in peace until I replay the Piso story and the use of the words Calpurnius Piso with the initials KP for Kenyan products, and then they start blowing up the Kenyan supermarkets again. Okay, I used to work at St Mary's Hospital, and when I met the Duke, he was really, really nervous because he thought I was a press man. In those days, I was a mindless molecular neuroscientist, and the whole of that period of my life was totally worthless, but now I'm on to everything they do. Son of Charles, Prince of Wales, and Lady Diana Spencer. That's a lie. Yeah, those people were sired by the Dutch monarchs. The first two children, Charles and Princess Anne, were actually sired by the Duke of Edinburgh, the bastard who killed Princess Diana in the end. Yeah, because she was an innocent. And here you've got another innocent who used to work in the prostitution dens in London that's killing kittens, and I've got the director numbers for the people that used to run that institution. Okay? So, Gallipoli is a scandal on both occasions, but in the Crimean it's almost forgotten, like HRH Queen Vic's first baby, and only one in legitimate wedlock. And Rupert Murdoch makes the movie about World War I, when he's already safely tucked away in America as an American citizen, yeah, with full access to all of the CIA's secrets about everybody's fudged elections. Yeah, there is no free press anymore, and he gets to direct the film in 1981 about killing of all of the innocents in the Gallipoli scandal. And the man who makes the Braveheart movie and is on rehab becomes the hero in that film as well. Yeah, all of the people that were conscripted are heroes. All of them are led into an unjustified conflict by the same families. Okay? And I've got a lot of respect for the Germans that I've met, because they're really efficient people and they are really determined to keep their economy viable. And it's tragic that the stupid people that are allowed to run the world this way can overcome them. And you know, the German leadership team that wanted to free Germany in World War II were just slaughtered by the Flemings and the profiteers that we talked about yesterday. And Klaus Maswich is playing a major role in that, same role as Hitler played in World War I. That's the head of BBC Light Entertainment, Klaus Maswich, who does all of the children's programmes on BBC from the 1960s right up into the mid-1980s. Yeah, that's all of the things that you see before the news. Yeah, all of the stories about Tintin, all of the stories about Zebedee and the religious context. Zebedee's only mentioned twice in the Bible, but everything that's in the Bible gets replayed as a joke in our current genocides. Okay, and Obama is in there too. He's Barry Soetoro in part of the biblical story, and Lady Aga is Lady Gaga. Yeah, right then. So, and you've now had explained for you the false news sector that is the killing of people, the suiciding of people in the Lindo wing, when Murdoch's press give them phone calls and try and get the news out early about how efficient they are at stealing the world from its legitimate owners on all continents. Okay, the Duke of Roxburgh is also an innocent man, especially since he incurred the cancer. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk to him about taking the world back to safety and decency. The heir apparent to the extant dukedom and the subsidiary titles is the son of Prince William, Prince George of Cambridge, another useful obfuscation tool, not yet condemned to being mad or blind and put in the straitjacket. He could well be a decent person, because he's got the commoner's bloodline intertwined with the tyrannical bloodlines of all of the people who get buried in Frogmore or in that massive institution that is St Giles and the religious fraud. Yeah, it is absolutely sickening. Right then, so Prince George, born 1819, lovely tash. I cannot remember how he got blinded, but when I first began to look at these things, the transcripts were openly available on Wikipedia. I've got it on my OneNote files, I'll look it up later on, but I want to get through the other tabs. Okay, so can you see how the relevance at Gallipoli of the Duke of Cambridge on the Caradoc is? And the Caradoc is a magnificent warship all those years ago. Okay, right then, I think that's enough for that one. So let's go to Blind King George again. This is not Greg Hallett's version, but this is, oh God, it's a historical timeline, and all of the jokes, when you look at it retrospectively, I only got down it a certain way, but let me take you to the highlighted bits. There's the mad George III. Okay, so I've highlighted it since 1727 and 1763. This is a history of the Scottish monarchy in inverted commas. Okay, and what you've got is a massive series of jokes against the people. So David Hume from the Berwickshire region publishes his treatise on human nature and founds the Scottish Enlightenment movement. That's the pacifist who launched World War I off the Hume Bridge in Sarajevo. 1736, captain of the Edinburgh Town Guard, Black Jock Porteous, is lynched by a mob objecting to his harsh treatment of smugglers. That's Melrose and Porteous, and the black fascist people and the smugglers are just trying to get a glass of whiskey on the cheap, because we begin to launch the prohibition regulations to keep the world divided, and we tax everything that could be made in the people's homes, and it becomes the massive whiskey industry, which is presumably why the people from the Usher dynasty approached me on the streets of Kelso on the weekend. I'd be delighted to talk to you, and I would be delighted to become a tour guide in Edinburgh, provided you let me tell the truth and not the propaganda. 1744, the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers founded, the world's first golf club. 1745, Charles Edward Stuart raises his standard at Glenfinnan, where my first American girlfriend got stuck in the hatch, the bit that would have been the bit that gets circumcised, at the top of the penile monument to that transfer of power from Free Paris to the Scottish Revolution at the start of the 45 Jacobite uprising. 1745, Charles Edward Stuart's victorious battle of Preston Pans, where my sister lives. And her name is Sheena, and that is one of the Jewish angels jokes. And it launches the nomenclature for China. His forces marched south and reached Derby, where Gordon Bowden and his corrupted MPs live, before retreating back to Scotland. Derby is on the Icknield Way, by the way, which takes us into David Icke and the Rice sisters, who are foreign secretaries in America through all of its recent warmongering period. That's Condoleezza and her wee sister. 1746, the Scots defeated at the Battle of Culloden. You remember the Germans that had the title Duke of Culloden?